In this video, we'll talk about 3D rendered images for Amazon product listings. My guest today is Anthony Cofrancesco from Picfu. It's an image comparison platform which is very useful for Amazon sellers. You can watch and find the links below to the demonstration of Picfu. But today, Anthony will be explaining how 3D rendered technology works and what you can do with that and what are the advantages versus the regular pictures you make for your product listings. Before you continue, don't forget to subscribe below to the YouTube channel of OrangeClick. Click the notification bell as well, because here we talk to different Amazon experts, also software creators and event organizers. Hello, Anthony. It's nice to have you here. Could you please introduce yourself and tell us what do you do in Amazon sellers industry?
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Anthony Cofrancesco. Right now, I work as the industry liaison for Picfu. So my job is to learn as much as I possibly can about listings and the entire creative process for Amazon sellers and work with them on how they can increase the quality of their listings and increase their conversion rate to make more sales.
And Picfu is quite interesting and unique platform for comparing different kind of images, and you can get A/B tests. And actually, we have a demo. You can watch. You can find the link upstairs and watch the demo of Picfu. Also, if you're interested in this service to check the links below, and you will find a coupon code with a discount. But Anthony, could you very shortly, in 2 sentences, explain what Picfu can do for Amazon sellers?
Yeah, so Picfu is essentially, it's a split testing tool where you can get feedback on any kind of creative asset. So your product packaging, your logos, whatever it might be. And it's a little bit different from a normal A/B test, which might take 2 or 3 weeks to run. Picfu is super fast. You upload the images and you're usually going to get a response in less than an hour. So it's really quick and it's real customer feedback.
All right, and today's topic is 3D rendering. But could you please tell me the difference between 3D rendering and photoshopping? Sometimes when I look at these pictures, people say it's 3D render, but for me it looks like this traditional photoshopping. So can you explain the technology differences?
Sure. So the only real difference between 3D render and Photoshop is that if you're photoshopping an image, that implies that in the real world, someone at some point took a photo of the product, right? And then they're going to take that photo and they're going to Photoshop it into a different environment. With a 3D render, the only difference is that someone never actually took a photo of that product. All of the photography, it's all done in a virtual environment. So like whether you'll see a lot of examples here, but 3D renders means it's all virtual.
Do you think that 3D rendering artists are more expensive when you want to invest in creative pictures?
3D renders are actually most of the time going to be much cheaper than a full-blown lifestyle photography shoot.
Because there is no like photo shooting, no studio involved. Interesting. All right, so let's jump into the slides and let's learn about 3D rendering.
All right. I'm really excited about this one. This is best practices for 3D renders. I'm not going to, you guys have seen me on the OrangeClick channel before, so I'm not going to tell you too much about myself. Aside from just a little bit of background, like I said earlier, right now I'm working for this company called Picfu. Prior to helping Picfu, I ran a creative agency for a little over 2.5 years called Virtuous Graphics, and I was able to see like hundreds and hundreds of these listings, which is kind of where this background information and knowledge comes from. Just a quick agenda about how we're going to be attacking 3D renders. It's a topic that probably not too many people have heard about before, but I'm here to tell you that it is really hot and the technology just keeps progressing more and more. So how the talk is going to flow today is I'm going to start you off first with a framework, and then I'm going to go through some strategies and concepts. The framework is just to get you to kind of understand what are 3D renders and if they might be a fit for your business. Then with strategies, these are things that you probably want to implement or at least think about implementing into your business. And then I'll leave you with concepts. Concepts are supposed to kind of inspire you. These are forward-thinking ideas that hopefully will get you thinking about 3D renders into the future. Last thing I'll say as well, guys, is like we were chatting about at the beginning, as industry liaison here at Picfu, literally my only job is to help out sellers. I get to spend all my time researching this information and sharing this information with you. So if you guys ever have a question about anything I'm talking about today, or just would like an extra set of eyes on your listing, feel free to hit me up, Anthony@picfu.com. Okay, so let's just jump right into it with the essential framework about 3D renders. So first thing that I'll say is that 3D rendering technology really has come a long way. So in the 1970s, we had just started with using computers to actually make 3D models. You'll see in the 1970s, it was really basic stuff. All the way into the early 2000s, you'll see that image on the left versus the image on the right, huge improvements in terms of graphics. Now, when you say something like 3D renders, most sellers probably think of really low quality 3D render images and think, hey, I don't want these on my listing, things that don't look good and don't look convincing. But like I said earlier, 3D rendering technology really has come a long way. And I'm going to show you a bunch. I don't expect you guys to believe that at the beginning of the presentation, but by the end, I think you're going to see the potential in this technology. So I'm going to start off with a big question, kind of the elephant in the room, and that is, like, what do potential customers think about 3D renders, right? Because that's the biggest question at the end of the day. And we use PickFu to survey 200 Amazon Prime members, and we showed them a bunch of different options about 3D renders because we wanted to get their thoughts and their opinions. And pretty much what happened is they hated it, right? They hated it, at least in theory. Because when we asked them just in an open-ended question, what did they think about either sellers using 3D renders on their listings or shopping for a product, and you were looking for a product and you were shown a 3D rendered, again, they really didn't like it. They were concerned about the product being real. They didn't want to see fake images. They were worried about if they trusted the product, what did it indicate overall about the quality, right? Again, they hated it in theory, but then when we showed them actual versions of 3D renders, really good examples, generally they actually couldn't tell a difference. And again, this is just that concept of, in theory, people really don't like the concept of 3D renders, but when you show them an image like this, unless you look really, really detailed at the image, you wouldn't actually tell most likely that the coffee cup here is not real. And then in even other scenarios where, like, this coffee cup is in the guy's hand, when we were running tests to see what were people's thoughts, we would see one comment like this, like, good scene, but maybe the detail isn't so realistic. But the vast majority of comments out of the 50 people that responded to these polls, there was only maybe 1 or 2 comments of people even suggesting that the image wasn't real. And then when we compared apples to apples, this image on the left-hand side is a 3D render. The image on the right-hand side is a real photo. We were able to consistently get either equal performing results or even 3D renders that would do better than a real-life photo. Another good example here is this children's slime kit. Option A is a real photograph, and option B is a 3D render. The big takeaway, though, I guess the key takeaway here is that if your 3D render looks as good or better than product photography, then it's something that you should probably think about exploring. Now, the next big question is, if we've figured out that, hey, the customers are okay with seeing 3D renders as long as they can't tell a difference, how does Amazon feel about 3D renders? Now, if you look inside of their terms of service, what they're going to show you, or what they're going to tell you, is that the photographs that you're using in your image gallery have to be professional photography. They can't be drawings or illustrations. But as you can imagine, and as this talk is going to cover today, you will go around Amazon and you're going to see a ton of examples of people breaking this rule and using 3D renders. At the end of the day, and this is coming from a background of someone who's worked at Amazon, one thing I can tell you is that Amazon, their biggest goal right now is they want to be the #1 most customer-centric company in the world, right? And so when it really comes down to their TOS and their guidelines about 3D renders, I think the reason that you're seeing such a widespread use of 3D renders across certain products and categories is because Amazon does know deep down that they know that 3D renders can have the potential to look better than real images. So again, the key takeaway is, if the 3D render looks as good or better than the product photography, then you should explore using 3D renders. The next little thing that I'm just going to toss in here as well, thinking about where the future of all of this is going in terms of 3D renders on Amazon. So IKEA, which is obviously a huge seller of furniture, 75% of all of the images in their catalogs are 3D renders. And you're going to start to see this a lot over the e-commerce space. And the reason why is because 3D renders really do offer some pretty distinct advantages over photography. So number one is the visual aesthetic. Now, I don't expect you to believe me yet. You're going to see a lot of examples of just amazing 3D renders in this presentation. But the 3D renders actually do have the potential to look a lot better than an actual real-life photo. Even if someone's able to tell the difference between a photograph and a 3D render, there is something that pops a little bit more about having an image that is absolutely perfect with no flaws. On top of that, the real big advantage of 3D renders is that it's seamless revisions, right? When you go in to do a lifestyle shoot, and I know because I've coordinated these, I ran these for multiple years, it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of effort. You have to coordinate not only the models and the location, but you have to coordinate all of these different items. And once you go to shoot that lifestyle photography shoot, you get one shot, right? And then if you want to do revisions, if you want to do it again, you have to go and duplicate all steps of that process. Versus a 3D render, once you have that product, once you have the environment, it becomes much easier to do seamless and almost infinite revisions. The last one, which is the biggest one, and this is no physical limitations, right? This is probably the single biggest advantage of using 3D renders. Number one is if you have a large item, if you're working with your photo studio is on the other side of the world from where you're located, you don't have to ship the product. On top of that, you don't need any equipment. Augustus and I were just talking a minute ago about what cameras we're using, right? 3D renders, you don't need any cameras. And then on top of that, you don't need any lights. You don't need any studio space. You don't need any props. You don't need all of these other items that you would associate with a normal lifestyle photography shoot. And then the big one as well is that there's no product needed. So in terms of, let's say you're launching a product, not even if you're going to launch something to something like Kickstarter, but let's say your manufacturer is working on making your items, right? But you want to go and have your photography shoot done, or you want to have your listing start to be created and the product's not even ready yet. And so that's another real big advantage is with product packaging or whether the physical product, you can actually get a listing. You can actually start to build your branding assets before the physical product even exists. Really what it comes down to at the end of the day is 3D rendering does offer big advantages in terms of speed, in terms of cost, and then also in terms of flexibility, what you're actually able to do with the images. So at this point, you're probably asking, okay, 3D renders sound like they might work, but what's the process of going and actually getting one? And the good news is it's actually really straightforward. And in a majority of scenarios, it's actually really easy to get 3D renders or to get started with 3D renders. So there's really three main ways. You can either go with a step file, a template, or a custom. A step file or a STP file, also it can be called this ISO 10303, but just call it a step file. Pretty much if you have any product that is either injection molding, if it's like a large piece of plastic, your manufacturer most likely is already going to have a step file. This is just like an assembly file, and it's going to show the different components of the product you're selling. And it's going to show kind of how it gets assembled. Like I said, most manufacturers will already have a STP file that they can send over to your 3D render artist and get pretty close to the design with very little work. If the STP file doesn't exist or your manufacturer can't share it with you, the other option is you can go based off of a template. So here, you can use libraries like TurboSquid or 3D Ocean. You will go onto these websites and literally see thousands and thousands and thousands of templates for things like cars, for animals, but then also imagine if you're selling like a hoverboard or a product that has been sold before, there's most likely a template for the exact same product or something very similar, which is a good starting point for that artist to create your 3D render. The last option, and this is actually, both of these are 3D renders, even Johnny Depp over here on the right, that is not a photo. The last option is you can always go completely custom. So if, for example, a STP file or a template isn't available, you can go and create 3D renders as you would a painting or as you would a sculpture completely from scratch with nothing but a photo or a concept. The thing though is as you get away from either a STP file or, as the design gets more and more custom for the render, obviously it's going to take more time and it's going to be a little bit costly, but there are pretty much unlimited possibilities that you can do in a virtual space. The key takeaway though, before we jump into some of the strategies, is that really make no mistake, the future is digital. This technology is still progressing, don't get me wrong, but every year, every month that time goes on, this technology is just going to get more and more photorealistic. There's really no question about that. And as these tools become more accessible to entry-level designers and they become easier to use, and as the quality of the photos become more photorealistic, I think because the cost savings are so big, I think you can fully expect to see renders make a really big way into e-commerce. So now what we're going to do, that's kind of your framework in terms of what are renders and how to think of them. Now we're going to walk through some of the strategies related to 3D renders and how they might be able to help out in your Amazon business. So first and foremost is you can get really convincing lifestyle images on static products with 3D renders. So imagine a static product versus a dynamic product. A static product is something that is just going to sit there. Most likely someone's not going to be wearing it. Someone's not going to be touching it, versus a more dynamic product like the one we see on the right-hand side here. You know, someone's wearing that baby bib. So the real thing in terms of static and dynamic products with 3D renders is once that render is made, you're going to have to be really careful about, if you are trying to Photoshop it for a dynamic product, making the exact angle fit so that it's going to look realistic. Here's a good example of a static product, right? This is going to be like a slam dunk. If you're selling a product that doesn't move, that doesn't need to be touched, you're going to be able to use a 3D render. I'd say in almost all scenarios, all you got to do is get yourself a stock photo that fits, and then you're going to be able to just splice it right in there. Another really good example as well, a strategy is for bulky items, right? 3D renders can make a, first off, shooting some bulky items, not only can they be incredibly expensive to ship and just a logistical nightmare to actually get to your photo studio, other options like this are just legitimately difficult to shoot. So this is this garden netting, right? Imagine, how would you even do this if you were a photo studio? How would you even get these shots? Maybe you're going to go and rent out some garden space. Maybe you're going to go and find someone with the flowers or the bushes that you need and try to put the netting around it. Or you could just go and use a 3D render, right? Another example, for bulky items. So you'll see here, you saw the rower earlier. You got these stand-up paddle boards in this treadmill. Again, things that would be really costly. You might spend $1,000 or $500 just to ship these stand-up paddle boards to get the shots done, versus 3D renders. Now you have it and you can stick it in whatever environment you want. What I will say as well is for 3D renders, avoid using 3D renders for highly complex or unique items. So things like fabric and clothing, they're going to be really difficult to 3D render. Things that have organic geometry. So imagine like a pear, for example. It's going to have small dents in it. The imperfections are what's going to make it look more realistic. So organic geometry is a little bit difficult. And then things that are like complex textures, right? 3D renders are really going to look best for smooth and uniform shaped items. Okay, for packaging, I'd say 3D renders are 100% of the time the way to go. Now, the reason why is because packaging follows similar formats. Like I was saying earlier, like it could be a cylinder or it could be a box. And the cool thing about product packaging is it's really easy to make the renders look really realistic, but all around, I think that if you would actually compare, even though that you know that this is a fake image, this one here on the left-hand side, or you might be able to tell that this one on the right is fake. If you compare this apples to apples against a product photograph, the 3D renders are almost always going to look better for packaging. They just look cleaner because your brain doesn't need to see the small imperfections on product packaging the same way that you would with products. If you have large volume of variations, right? So for example, here we've got these phone cases that come in different color variations, or on the left-hand side here, we have these plumbing parts, right? So imagine if you're selling a product and you're selling a large range of variations. I remember when I went to Prosper Show, I was talking to someone who did sell plumbing accessories, selling them on Amazon. And he said, for one single, it was something like 500 ASINs, right? That would never, ever make sense to go and photograph that and to do a lifestyle shot. Like any photographer charging you to take a photo of every single one of those individual 500 different ASINs, it's going to be ludicrously expensive. And so same thing with color variations or sizing variations. 3D renders really can do a lot in terms of cost savings and in terms of just hitting all of the volumes and getting realistic shots. Another really big one, this is a great strategy if you're selling supplement products, if you're selling anything like a CPG, like consumer packaged goods, is you can use 3D renders to actually place your products on a simulated shelf, right? You'll see it here with these line of diapers, or I guess these are baby wipes. And then on the right-hand side with this vitamin C serum, I've seen really good examples, really convincing examples of people who were selling, they had supplements, right? And they had maybe 5 or 6 different variations of supplements. And what they did is they filled up an entire row almost as if their supplement line was on the shelf next to other major brands from GNC in like a simulated shelf. So again, something that if you're doing a lifestyle shot and you wanted to make it seem like your brand was bigger than it was, you might have to rent out a grocery store. I don't even know if a grocery store would let you come in and do shots like that. But in a virtual world, it's very easy to do and you can make it look very convincing. If you have a product where the internal working parts are actually important, then a 3D render can also be a great way to show an exploded product view. So imagine if I'm trying to sell this fidget spinner, right? And I'm trying to differentiate my fidget spinner versus all of the other fidget spinners. What I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to point to why my bearings are different, or why the internals of the fidget spinner themselves are different. Or if I'm trying to sell my microphone, even if I'm trying to differentiate the product, I want to show the customer and say, hey, these are the reasons that this microphone is actually premium to all the other options that you've been seeing. If you're selling a technical product, this is incredibly effective because it allows people to see not only, even if they don't really care, like the scientific reason why your bearings are better, just showing an exploded view of your product does stand out from your competition. It does make you look at, hey, there is a reason that you actually want to buy this product versus someone else. Also in product videos are super big. So I'm just going to let this play here. And as you can imagine, your product videos are mostly going to just be showing off the product and then showing its features and benefits. 3D renders are fantastic for this, not only because it can show a 360 view of the product, but for those earlier shots where you're showing, the product actually exploding. This is something that you can't do in real life, right? You can't get unless you like hang things with string, which I've seen people try to do. You just can't do exploded shots like that in a video as effectively. Now, here's a really big tip. If you are an Amazon vendor or you have a dedicated Amazon account manager, a lot of people don't know this, but you can actually put 360 images into your image gallery, right? And so you can actually put it and it'll show up as not an image, not a video, but a separate image that actually allows you to go through and see all sides of the product. Again, this is for people that are Amazon vendors, or if you have a dedicated account manager, they can go and upload the product into Seller Central. You just have to ask them in advance. Now, there's been studies on the benefit of having 3D renders or 360 photos in your listings or on a page. And there's a couple case studies that I read that said you'll see an increase in conversion of 27%. Now, that was like a very specific scenario and it was off Amazon, but there definitely is an uptick in conversion rate just being able to add a 360 photo. So if you are an Amazon vendor or you have a dedicated account manager, this is something you should definitely look at doing. People do like to see it. People do like to click it. I also anticipate that as time goes on, Amazon is going to roll out this feature the same way that they're doing right now with opening up videos to non-brand registered seller. This, again, like we were talking about earlier, this makes the buying process better and more clear for the customer. So you better believe that in the next few months, in the next year, I won't be surprised to see this 360 view rolled out to sellers that are not vendors or don't have dedicated account managers that can upload the photo. So the last thing I'll say, the last couple minutes here, just wrapping up, these are a couple concepts. Hopefully we'll get you thinking about the future of using 3D renders. Number one is if you're launching new products, so whether you're going to do that through Kickstarter, whether you're going to like ask your audience using ManyChat, 3D renders are a great idea if you're launching new products before you launch them to actually get ideas about how the product looks or about how it functions just in a digital form. Another really big thing, I think you're going to start to see this more and more. It already exists currently on Shopify, but it's using 3D renders in an augmented reality environment. So this already exists on Shopify. You can, like, if you're buying this box or this table, you can go and put it in your environment using your smartphone to see how it would look in your home. So that being said, guys, that's pretty much all I've got today. I do want to give a huge shout out to Corey Rose from Fade Visuals. He was really helpful in making this presentation, sending over a lot of really good examples and answering a lot of my questions. So just wanted to mention that. That's pretty much all I got, Augustus, on 3D renders. Guys, if you're going to use PickFu, support Augustus, support Orange Click, and use the code Orange Click, and you'll get 50% off your first poll.
All right. Thank you very much, Anthony. And I wanted to ask you, you mentioned at the beginning that when you're using 3D rendering technology, you don't need lights, you don't need cameras. So what Amazon seller needs to provide to the 3D render artist?
Yeah, so in most cases, what the 3D rendering artist is going to ask you for, first and foremost, if you can get them an STP file, that's what they're going to ask for. That'll be from your manufacturer. If the manufacturer doesn't have an STP file, what they're probably going to ask for is just images of your photo from all different angles. And so just the same way that they would do a sculpting or a painting, they just need to see what the product looks like, and then that's pretty much all they'll need to create it.
And then these artists would, from the photos, they would do STP file, right?
What the 3D artist is going to do is they're going to go and create the product in their environment. So they won't necessarily go and create an STP file, but they'll create something that is pretty similar to that.
All right. So STP file is something which is from different kind of production line, but it could help 3D artists a lot.
Yeah, the STP file is just like an assembly file that your manufacturer uses to put the product together. So they'll likely have an STP file that they can send to the 3D artist. I do want to clarify as well that the artist won't send you any of these things. They'll just send you the actual images. So it's super easy to just upload to your listing. The technical side is the artist will take care of that.
And in your examples, you showed, for example, a lot of pictures with cup in different environments. But I think this is very easy to make using Photoshop. So I would say that these images are made with Photoshop, not with some other kind of technology.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like you can it's two sides of the same coin, right? So like in other presentations, like you can do the same thing whether it's a 3D object or someone's taking the photo and they're photoshopping the mug in. The only difference between using 3D renders is no one actually physically took the shot of that photo. So 3D renders, you could do those lifestyle shots without ever picking up a camera, versus if you're going to Photoshop that cup in there, someone did have to pick up that cup at some point, take a photo of that cup, and then Photoshop it in, if that makes sense.
All right, so no camera trick would work only if you have STP file, but if you don't have STP file, then you can just photograph your product with a camera, your mobile phone, and send it to the 3D render, right?
Yeah, the other advantage of using a 3D render, like versus just normal Photoshop for photography, is with 3D renders, you know, you can, once you've taken the photo once, right? Like if I'm going to try to Photoshop this bottle into my hand, I got to get the angle exactly right. Versus if I'm doing a 3D render, I might go and try to take this a few shots. I didn't quite get it. I got to change the angle. Let's go take a few more shots, try to get the angle right. Versus a 3D render, you can just, you know, you don't have to go back and recreate the shots every time. You just move it in the virtual environment and then send it to the Photoshop person.
All right. Thank you very much, Anthony. And those people who are interested to a platform where they can test their 3D or any kind of handmade images for their product listings, and they can use PickFu service, right? And they could follow the links below this video, and also you will find a coupon code where you will get some discount. And could you one more time explain what is PickFu and how does it help Amazon sellers?
Yeah, sure. So PickFu is just a tool that allows you to get real insights from consumers in just a few minutes. So normally I ask Amazon sellers and I say, like, where do you go for feedback? And a lot of people say they'll go to their partner, their spouse, they'll go to their friends or family, or they just go and ask, random strangers at Starbucks and say, hey, what do you think about this product? And the thing is, there's nothing wrong with going with any of those methods. But if you're spending all of this time and effort and money into launching a product on Amazon, it probably makes sense to go with some opinions rather than just going with your gut. So what PickFu allows you to do is you can show anything you want. You could show an image, you could show product packaging, you could show logos to all real people. And then within about an hour, you'll get real feedback. And the cool thing about PickFu is they don't just vote like I like option A or I like option B. They're actually required to give you detailed feedback as to why they chose that. So super helpful for sellers. I'd highly recommend taking a look at it and checking it out.
Thank you very much, Anthony, and good luck in your business. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.
I do hope it was useful to listen and to hear the differences between 3D rendering, photoshopping, and regular shooting. So if you want to test PickFu, you will find the links below. But now I would invite you to subscribe to the Orange Click channel, and you can watch the next video, which is also about images. Learn here. Click, click. If you are still here, I am waiting in the next video.